You notice inconsistencies now. Things that once escaped your awareness suddenly become impossible to ignore. Energy and words no longer match. Someone says they love you, but your body feels tense around them. Your chest tightens. Your nervous system becomes alert. And even when their words sound perfect, something deep inside you whispers, "Be careful." At first, you try to ignore it. You tell yourself you're overthinking, being too sensitive, too guarded, too damaged from the past. But the feeling keeps returning, because awakening changes the way you perceive people. You stop listening only with your ears. You begin listening with your intuition. And intuition speaks quietly, not through panic, not through loud fear, through subtle discomfort, a strange heaviness, an unexplained exhaustion after certain conversations, a silent internal warning your mind cannot logically explain yet. That's because your soul detects emotional dishonesty faster than language can hide. And honestly, this stage becomes emotionally exhausting, because once you truly see people, you cannot unseen them. You begin noticing manipulation hidden inside kindness. People who help you only to gain control over you later. People who support you publicly but secretly compete with you privately. People who call themselves loyal while quietly draining your peace behind closed doors. You notice jealousy hidden inside compliments, resentment hidden inside jokes, control hidden inside affection. And suddenly, the world feels different, not darker. Clearer. That clarity changes the way you move through life. You stop romanticizing people. Stop projecting goodness onto everyone. Stop confusing potential with character. Instead, you begin observing, quietly, carefully. You watch patterns now. Consistency, energy shifts. The way someone behaves when they no longer benefit from you. Because awakening teaches empaths something painful. Words reveal intention. But patterns reveal truth, and truth rarely hides forever. That's why your circle often becomes smaller during this stage. You start recognizing how many people were performing versions of themselves around you. Some only mirrored your kindness to gain access to your energy. Some only offered love when you were easy to control. Some only respected you when you ignored your own boundaries. And once your intuition fully awakens, pretending not to notice becomes impossible. But here is where many empaths make a devastating mistake. They betray their intuition because they fear loneliness. They stay in toxic relationships because their heart keeps searching for the good in people who continuously wound them. They ignore red flags, dismiss discomfort, rationalize emotional chaos. Not because they are weak, because they desperately want connection to be real. So they silence themselves, again and again. And every time they ignore their intuition, their soul pays the price. Becca. Use your intuition is not paranoia. It is accumulated wisdom from every painful experience you survived. Your body remembers what your mind tries to minimize. That uneasy feeling you get around certain people, that exhaustion after specific conversations, that strange emotional heaviness you keep trying to explain away, that is not irrational fear. That is your nervous system recognizing danger before your conscious mind fully understands it. Your soul notices inconsistencies long before your logic catches up. And awakening begins the moment you stop gaslighting yourself out of your own truth. Read that carefully. Most empaths were conditioned to distrust themselves. You were taught to prioritize politeness over instinct, comfort over truth, attachment over inner peace. So even when your spirit screamed that something felt wrong, you stayed. You tolerated things your intuition already warned you about months earlier. And deep down, you already know how many times your eye and intuition was right. You remember the people your soul warned you about immediately, the relationships that drained you from the beginning, the conversations that left your spirit unsettled long before the betrayal finally revealed itself. Your intuition saw it all. You just doubted yourself because you feared appearing cold, dramatic, or difficult. But awakening changes that. You stop apologizing for your awareness. You stop forcing trust where your spirit feels unsafe. You stop abandoning your instincts just because someone appears charming on the surface. Because true healing teaches you something life-changing. Not every uncomfortable feeling is anxiety. Sometimes it is wisdom. And the moment you finally trust that inner voice without needing external validation, your awakening becomes irreversible. Because your soul was never trying to make you fearful. It was trying to make you conscious. This sign scares people the most. The things that once distracted you, stop with. Orking. Small talk feels unbearable. Fake ambition feels meaningless. Surface-level relationships feel spiritually dead. You begin craving something deeper. Truth, purpose, alignment. And suddenly, you question everything: your friendships, your habits, your identity, even the person you've been pretending to be. Because awakening destroys the false version of you first, the version built from survival, people-pleasing, fear, emotional dependency. And this part feels like grief, because you are mourning an old self that can no longer survive inside you. Most people run from this stage. They numb themselves, distract themselves, return to toxic cycles because familiarity feels safer than transformation. But you can't unknow what your soul has already discovered. You were not born merely to survive emotionally. You were born to become conscious. And consciousness changes everything. This sign scares people the most, because this is the moment your old life begins losing its grip on you. The things that once distracted you stop working. Small talk feels unbearable now. Conversations that revolve around gossip, status, or appearances suddenly feel empty. You sit in rooms full of people, yet feel completely disconnected. Not because you think you're better than anyone, because your soul is starving for something real. Fake ambition starts feeling meaningless. You watch people chase attention, validation, money, approval, and something inside you quietly asks, "For what?" You begin realizing how much of modern life is built on distraction, constant noise, constant performance, constant emotional numbness. And suddenly, you can't participate in it the same way anymore. Surface-level relationships feel spiritually exhausting. Forced conversations drain your energy. Pretending becomes painful, because awakening does something terrifying. It removes your ability to comfortably live unconsciously. And once that process begins, there is no going back. You be Jin, craving something deeper, not entertainment, truth, not attention, purpose, not temporary excitement, alignment. You want your outer life to finally match what your soul feels internally. And that desire changes everything. You start questioning your friendships. Why do certain people leave you emotionally drained? Why do some connections only survive when you suppress your real thoughts? Why have you spent so much of your life performing versions of yourself just to feel accepted? Then you question your habits, the distractions, the routines, the endless coping mechanisms you once used to avoid yourself. And eventually, you begin questioning your identity, not the surface identity, the deeper one. Who are you beneath survival mode? Beneath people-pleasing? Beneath fear? Beneath the emotional mask you created to survive rejection, abandonment, and disappointment? That question shakes your entire world, because awakening destroys the false version of you first. The version built from emotional survival. The version that tolerated disrespect to avoid loneliness. The version that stayed quiet to keep peace. The version that attached self-worth to being needed by others. For years, you thought that version was your personality, but it wasn't. It was adaptation, a survival identity created by pain. And now, your soul can no longer breathe inside it. That realization feels like grief, real grief, because awakening is not just discovering yourself. It is mourning the person you had to become in order to survive. You mourn the years spent abandoning yourself, the relationships built on pretending, the dreams you ignored because fear felt safer than truth. And honestly, this stage feels emotionally brutal, because the old version of you does not disappear quietly. It fights to survive. That's why most people run from awakening. They numb themselves instead. They drown themselves in distraction, overwork, toxic relationships, endless entertainment, anything that prevents silence. Because silence reveals truth, and truth changes everything. Many people return to toxic cycles simply because familiarity feels safer than transformation. Pain becomes predictable. Chaos becomes comfortable. Even suffering can become addictive when it's familiar enough. So people stay asleep emotionally, not because they are incapable of awakening, because awakening demands death, not physical death, ego death, the death of illusions, the death of false identity, the death of every mask built to survive a world that taught you to disconnect from yourself. And that process is terrifying, because before your new life begins, everything false inside you must collapse first. But here is the beautiful part most people never reach. Once your soul recognizes truth, you cannot unknow it. You cannot return to shallow living after experiencing deeper awareness. Your spirit won't allow it anymore. That's why old distractions stop satisfying you, why fake connection feels unbearable, why your inner world has become louder than external noise. Your consciousness is expanding, and consciousness changes the way you experience everything. The way you love, the way you speak, the way you choose people, the way you protect your peace. You stop asking, "How do I fit into this world?" and begin asking, why was I abandoning myself to fit into spaces that were never aligned with my soul in the first place? That question changes your life forever, because you were never born merely to survive emotionally. You were born to awaken, to become conscious, to finally see yourself clearly after years of emotional blindness. And once that awakening truly begins, nothing false can survive inside you anymore. This is the final sign. And it changes your entire life. You stop over-explaining yourself. Stop chasing closure. Stop begging people to understand your heart. Because finally, you understand it yourself. You were born. Begin protecting your energy like something sacred. You say no without guilt. Leave without warning. Detach without needing revenge. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally realized this brutal truth. You cannot heal in places that require your self-betrayal. And awakening empaths eventually reach a breaking point where survival is no longer enough. You stop asking, how do I make everyone happy? And start asking, what is this constant self-abandonment costing my soul? That question awakens your power. Because the deepest transformation happens the moment you realize your sensitivity was never the curse. Your unconsciousness was. You were never weak for feeling deeply. You were powerful in a world addicted to emotional numbness. And now, you are remembering who you were before the world taught you to silence yourself. So if lately you've felt different, disconnected, emotionally exhausted, maybe your soul is not falling apart. Maybe it's finally waking up. And once an empath truly awakens, they never see the world the same way again. This is the final sign. The sign that changes your entire life forever. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, internally, spiritually. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop writing paragraphs trying to make people understand your intentions. Stop defending your boundaries to people committed to misunderstanding you. Stop exhausting your soul trying to prove your heart is pure. Because finally, you understand it yourself, and that changes everything. For most of your life, you needed external validation to feel emotionally safe. You needed reassurance, approval, confirmation that your feelings were justified. But awakening ends that dependency. Slowly, you stop needing everyone to agree with your truth before honoring it. You begin trusting your own emotional experience, and that is power. Real power. Not control over others, control over yourself. You begin protecting your energy like something sacred, because you finally understand how expensive your attention truly is. You realize every conversation affects your nervous system. Every relationship affects your spirit. Every environment either nourishes your peace or drains it. So now, you become careful, intentional, conscious. You say no without drowning in guilt afterward. You leave places that feel emotionally unsafe. You detach from people without needing revenge, closure, or dramatic endings. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally realized something brutal. You cannot heal in environments that require your self-betrayal to survive. Read that again. Some people only accept you when you are abandoning yourself, when you stay silent, overgive, over-tolerate, over-sacrifice. But the awakened version of you can no longer survive inside those dynamics. And eventually, every empath reaches a breaking point, a moment where emotional survival is no longer enough. You become tired of cons, tantly carrying everyone else while secretly collapsing inside yourself. Tired of being emotionally available for people who disappear the moment you need support. Tired of shrinking your truth just to avoid making others uncomfortable. And one day, a new question begins echoing inside your soul. What is this constant self-abandonment costing me? That question awakens your power, because the moment you truly ask it, you begin seeing your life differently. You start recognizing how much pain came from disconnecting from yourself, not from sensitivity, not from caring deeply, from ignoring your own needs while prioritizing everyone else's emotions. That's the real wound. And healing begins the moment you stop treating your empathy like a weakness that needs fixing. Because your sensitivity was never the curse. Your unconsciousness was. For years, you moved through life disconnected from your own boundaries, your own intuition, your own worth. You gave people access to parts of you they never respected. You tolerated emotional chaos because loneliness felt more frightening than self-betrayal. But awakening changes that. You finally understand that feeling deeply is not weakness. It is awareness. You were never weak for caring, weak for loving, weak for feeling emotions intensely. You were powerful in a world that survives by becoming emotionally numb. And that power terrified people who benefited from your silence. Because conscious people become harder to manipulate. harder to guilt trip, harder to emotionally control, harder to drain. And now, you are remembering who you were before the world taught you to disconnect from yourself, before trauma taught you survival, before rejection taught you self-doubt, before emotional pain convinced you that love required suffering. You are returning to your original self, the version of you that existed before fear became your identity. That process feels strange sometimes, lonely, disorienting, emotionally exhausting, because awakening is not comfortable. It is the collapse of illusion. But if lately you've felt different, disconnected from old environments, emotionally exhausted by shallow interactions, maybe your soul is not falling apart. Maybe it is finally refusing